So main objective of leases, the objective of leasing standard, that is accounting standard codification number 842. What is the main objective? It is to increase transparency and the comparability among the organizations by having lessees recognize lease assets. One is lease assets and second one is lease liabilities on the balance sheet for essentially all the leases. For all the leases, what is the main objectives? Here is one term called as leases. Remember one thing, for CMA, accounting of lesser is not there. Accounting of lesser is not there. We don't have in our syllabus. Earlier, we used to have till 2019, but from 2020, the portion was changed of CMA, and we don't have this now. Your GLIME edition of 2022, you don't have that. But if you have edition of 2020, then you may have the accounting of lesser. But now in your syllabus, the accounting of lesser is not there. So lessees accounting is there. So we will be studying the lease chapter from the lessee point of view. Okay. Now what is lease? What is lease? See, before that, lesser. Sir, what is lesser? Lesser is the owner. Who is lesser? Lesser is the owner. Owner. Yeah, he is also called as a landlord. Landlord. Owner of flat, owner of property, owner of shop, owner of any real estate. Right? He is a supplier. In this standard, in this lease chapter, he is also called a supplier. And lesser leases to a lessee. So the opposite of lesser is the lessee. So there is an agreement. There is an agreement between whom? Between the lesser and between the lessee. Right? Between the lesser and the lessee. So one person is lesser and the other party is lessee. Okay. So the lesser is a landlord, lessee is a tenant, and lesser is a supplier, and lessee is a customer. So opposite of supplier is customer, opposite of landlord is tenant, opposite of lesser is lessee. Got it? So these are few terms that you should understand. One more term, that is lease. What is lease? Many people get confused between lease and rent. Many people get confused between lease and rent. Okay, rent is just for 11 months. After the term or the duration gets completed, the tenant, this is the landlord, this is the tenant. Tenant doesn't become the owner of the property. Doesn't become the owner of the property. Even there is no option to exercise. There is a term called as purchase bargain. Yeah, option to purchase the property at the end of the term. That option is also not there with the tenant under the rent agreement. Lease, let us understand now what is the meaning of lease. Okay. So what is lease? Lease is a long-term contract. It is a long-term contract. So more than 11 months, yeah, more than a year, more than 12 months. Okay. So it's a long-term contract. But however, at times the lease contract can be less than 12 months also. Less than 12, which is called as short-term lease. Which is called as short-term lease. So there are short-term lease also whose duration is less than 12 months. But generally speaking, usually a lease is a long-term contract. Long-term contract in which the owner of the property, who is the owner of the property? Just now we saw who is the owner, who is the landlord? Lesser. So the lesser allows another party, the opposite party, who is called as lessee or the tenant or the customer, allows another party to control the use of the property. He allows the lessee to control the use of the property. It means lessee will use the property and all the controls of using the property will be in the hand of lessee for a stated period. So there will be a term which will be decided between the lessor and the lessee in exchange for the stated payment. Okay, consideration. Payment means consideration. The lessor will not give his property to use to the lessee free of cost. Now he will take something, he will charge payment. So that is called as consideration. Okay. Now, sir, here we understood the term control of use of property. So what is mean by control? So control over the use of identified asset means the lessee has both two things, control over two things. First, lessee has the right to obtain substantially all of the economic benefits from the use of the assets, and the lessee has the right to direct the use of that. So if these two rights are in the hands of lessee, then we can say that they have entered into the agreement of lessee. Now, here we saw the two terms here. First is that the lessee will have the right to obtain substantially all the economic benefits from the use of assets. Means what? Who will use this asset? Lessee will use this asset. Whatever profit, whatever income he derives from this particular asset, whatever he does, whatever profession, whatever business he carries out in this particular property or shop, etc., all the profit, all the income will be of lessee and not of lessor. He will not share. The lessee will not share the income with the lessor. It will substantially all the economic benefits of the use of assets will be in the hands of lessee and not lessor. And second thing, the lessee will have the right to direct use of assets. So this is a shop. For example, there was one wall in this shop. So the shop was divided into two parts. Now, as per the requirement of lessee, the lessee needs two parts, three parts, for example. So what he will do, he will construct, he will demolish this wall and he will construct one wall here and one wall here, and he will divide this property equally into one, this part, and this part. So he has the right to do that. Okay. Now see the primary issue. The primary issue is whether the lease agreement transfers substantially all the economic benefits. This is the first issue in this chapter. And second, the risk of ownership. Second one is about the risk of ownership of the asset to the lessee. So what is the primary issue in the lease agreement? Whether all the benefits is transferred to the lessee first, and second, whether the risk of ownership is transferred to the lessee. And if both, the answer of both these questions is yes, then it is a lease agreement, or else it is not a lease. Okay. Now, all the leases create an asset, right? All the leases creates what? An asset. The right to use the asset and a liability. The liability to make lease payment. See, simple. It's very simple. I'll erase this. It will make you understand here. It's very easy. So, for example, this one is a lessor. This one is a lessee. This one is a lessor. This one is lessee. Okay. This is the property in which they are dealing. Okay. So lessor gives this property to lessee to use. Sir, got it. So what will happen here? Lessor gives the right to use the asset. So lessee gets the right to use the asset. Lessee gets the right. The right of what? To use the asset. To use the asset. In the same manner, in the same way as lessee, I'm talking from the lessee point of view. Think from the lessee point of view. Lessee. As lessee gets the right to use the asset, what will lessee pay in return? What will be the another right, another liability upon the lessee, which will incur? As a lessee has got the right to use this property, in the same way, lessee will have a liability. Liability of what? To make the lease payment. To make the lease payments. Now, as this lessee has got the right to use the asset, will lessor give the right to use the asset free of cost? No. Lessor will charge some amount, which is called as lease payments. Lease installments. Lease liability. We call it as lease liability. So, in consideration, in payment for against this right, against the right to use, lessee will have a liability. Liability of what? Paying the lease payment. To whom? To lessor. Okay. So the basic principle is that lessee should recognize the assets and liabilities that arise from the leases. Okay. This is the basic principle. What is the basic principle? That lessee should recognize the assets and liabilities that arise from the Leases. Okay. Now, a lessee should recognize a right of use asset representing its right to use the leased asset for the term of the lease. Now, what? See, we'll talk from the lessee. As I already told you, in our syllabus, CMA will be talking only from the lessee point of view. You don't think from the lessor point of view. Lessor's accounting, it is there in CPA, ACCA. It is not there in CMA. So, everything we will be talking from the lessee. Everything. But to know little bit, just for your sake, as far as types of lessees are concerned, there I have given you the types of lessor for your information, for your knowledge on nothing else. Okay. So lessee should recognize what first? Right of use asset, representing its right to use the leased asset for the term of use. Yeah. Now see here, the lessee has got the right to use asset. Which asset? This asset. Okay. It means it is like lessee is purchasing the asset. So lessee will pass the entry right of use asset account debit. The asset is named as what here? Right of use asset, because that asset is not owned by the lessee directly. At the end of the term, maybe he will own, and that type of lease is called as finance lease. We'll come to that later. But let us understand that due to this right to use the asset, what entry will lessee pass? Yeah, what will lessee recognize? He will say right of use asset. I'll get right of use asset. The name of that asset will name that asset at right of use asset. For example, we have taken machinery on list. We'll say right of use machinery. We have taken building. We'll say right of use building. Shop. We'll say right of use shop. Property. Right of use property, etc., etc. So asset. When asset comes in, lessee will say ROU asset account debit. And instead of that, for this right of use, yeah, as he have purchased the asset, he will have to pay. So there will be liability for payment. He will say, I'm going to pay you in future in the form of lease payment. So I'll say to lease liability, the lease payment. Lease liability we call. Lease payment is also okay. Lease liability. Okay. So that is what here it is given. A lessee should recognize the right of use asset representing its right to use the leased asset for the term of the lease. So here one another term came into picture, that is right of use asset. Second, a lessee should also recognize what? Liability to make lease payments, which is called as lease liability, which is also called as what? Lease liability. Lease liability over the lease term. Okay. Now the lessee amortizes the right of use asset. Now I have got this asset, right? Common sense. Now I have got this asset. I'll charge depreciation. So in this chapter, we can't say depreciation because we don't own that asset, but we'll call it as amortization. We'll call it as what? Amortization. We'll write off the asset, right? We'll amortize. So we'll amortize. In that case, ROU asset account will get credited. ROU asset account will credited. And what will be debited? Amortization expense account will debited. So we'll say amortization expense account debit. Amortization expense account debit to ROU asset. As per US GAAP, here it is. You can write ROU asset, or you can even write accumulated amortization. Accumulated amortization account, because accumulated amortization account is deducted from ROU asset, right? So you can write accumulated amortization, or you can directly write ROU asset. Yeah, accumulated amortization dash ROU asset chal jayega. It will work. Okay. So the lessee amortizes the right of uses. Okay. Each lease payment made by the lessee will include a payment of acha. Now see here, I spoke about this ROU. Sir, this is ROU. It has to be amortized. Iska sir ho gaya. What about this lease liability? Achha, lease liability, I will pay it. Right now, lease liability ko hum kya karenge? We will pay. For example, I have taken the lease for 5 years. So I'll pay them every 5 years annually or half yearly as per your terms and conditions. Say annually, for example. So every year, year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, year 5. Every year, for example, the lease payment is $50, $50,000. So $50,000 $50,000 every year I will pay. Every year I will pay. I will pay, right? So what entry will I pass at that time whenever I will pay? This is called as subsequent measurement. This entry we pass at initial measurement. This is called as initial measurement. First entry at the time of commencement of the lease agreement. At the time of lease agreement. And these after 1 year, right? At the end of 1 year. After 1 year, we'll pass those entries. So what entry will pass? For example, we paid first installment, yeah, first lease payment. We'll say lease payment account debit, yeah, lease liability account debit, yeah, lease payment account debit. We'll pay, right? To cash. To cash. Acha, liability we will pay. Acha. So what? So these lease liability, it is divided into two parts. We don't say lease liability. It is divided. That lease liability is there now. That lease liability is divided into two parts in this chapter. Why? Because it will include one interest portion. First, it will include the principal portion, and second, it will include the interest portion. It will include what? Interest. Principal portion means whatever the lease installment is there. Installment amount. That is lease payment. Yeah, lease liability. Lease liability. Interest we are paying in future. We are not paying just now. Right now, so we'll have to pay interest on it. That is called interest, right? That is called interest. So here, each lease payment made by the lessee will include what? Payment of interest, and second, payment representing reduction of lease liability. Lease liability, right? So as far as entry is concerned, what entry can we pass? Interest expense. Getting? I'm writing there only. So here we will not write lease payment. Here what we write? We will write interest expense account debit. First part, and second part, what account debit we will say? Lease expense account debit. Yeah, lease liability. Yeah, lease payment account debit. Lease payment account. Lease liability account debit. Lease liability account debit. Liability get reduces. ये liability का portion pay किया हम लोग ने to cash. ये interest का portion pay किया. See, I'm creating a background for you now. I'm going to deal with this chapter in detail. I think today I'll be taking for 4 to 5 hours. Yeah, 3 to 4 hours today's class, because chapter is big, na. Halaki in your climb textbook it is just for 3 to 4 pages. But I've prepared notes, but it is around 13 to 14 pages. Today's target is to complete lease chapter plus income tax chapter. This is my target. So how many lectures? For example, 4 lectures, 5 lectures, 6 lectures. How much lectures are required? I will give in the 2 days for today. Okay, आ जाइए. तो कुछ नहीं करने की, ज्वाइन करना है, फिर से ज्वाइन करना. जोर का टाइम हो गया, वो नमाज के लिए आधा घंटा ब्रेक, उसके बाद फिर से ज्वाइन कर लेना है. ओके, इतना सर समझ में आ गया सर, एक बेसिक क्लियर हो गया. अभी तक पूरा तो समझ में आया नहीं होगा, उतना मैंने बताया भी नहीं है पूरा, राइट? लेकिन फिर भी एक अंदाजा आया होगा, व्हाट इज लेसर, व्हाट इज लेसी, राइट? अभी तो चैप्टर स्टार्ट भी नहीं हुआ है, ये तो बैकग्राउंड बनाया मैंने. चलो ये रहने दो, मैं नीचे से आता हूँ, ये रब करता हूँ. विल स्टार्ट फ्रॉम हियर नाउ. We'll start from here. Ajay. Types of lease. Types of leases. Now everyone will pay attention. यहाँ से अपना चैप्टर स्टार्ट हो रहा है अच्छे से. ये भी इंपॉर्टेंट ही है, कुछ भी फालतू का कुछ डाला ही नहीं मैंने नोट्स में, जो भी इंपॉर्टेंट ही है. फिर भी अब प्लीज पे अटेंशन पूरा ध्यान से. ओके, यस. तो मैं ये कह रहा था यहाँ पर, यस, टाइप्स ऑफ लीजेस. फर्स्ट ऑफ ऑल, फॉर लेसर there are different types of leases, and for lessee there are different types of leases. For lessee there are 3 types of leases: short term lease, finance lease, operating lease. In your GLIME book, Hawk book or Wiley book, there are two leases only given, finance and operating. But in GLIME, they have again covered this short-term lease afterwards. I will show you. This is GLIME, okay? So definition of lease classification test they have written, and then directly they have gone, see, they started with short-term lease then direct. And here they have said a lease is classified as when none of the five classification criteria were met, the lease is classified as operating lease by the lessee. So finance operating, ये देखो, for finance and operating leases, और हॉक में भी वही बताया, बाइले में भी वही, लेकिन देखो ग्लाइम में यहाँ से उन्होंने अलग से अ शॉर्ट टर्म लीज कवर्ड किया हुआ है, ठीक है, मतलब एक स्ट्रक्चर में नहीं दिया हुआ है आबड़ दोबड़ फॉर्म में। तो ये पीडीएफ में चाहिए तो आप लोगों को भेज दूंगा, लीज के लिए इंपॉर्टेंट है, सीक्वेंस में मैंने लिखा है हर एक चीज, ठीक है, तो याद रख लेना है। और जो सीक्वेंस में हम लोग सीखे उसी सीक्वेंस से मैंने डाला है। एक्चुअली बोला जाए तो सर हर टेक्स्ट बुक में की हुई है, क्योंकि दीज आर द टू मेन इंपॉर्टेंट लीसेस जो लेसी के बुक्स में आते हैं। ये तो बहुत कम रहता है प्रैक्टिकल लाइफ में, इसलिए उसकी बात नहीं होती है, लेकिन सिलेबस में है, ठीक है। ये तो होता ही है प्रैक्टिकल में, ये भी होता है, नहीं होता नहीं, ये भी ज्यादा रहता है, लेकिन जो हार्ड लगता है या जिसके ऊपर फोकस किया जाता है वो फाइनेंशियल के ऊपर किया जाता है, फाइनेंशियल एंड ऑपरेटिंग लीज, इसलिए इसको लोग इग्नोर करते हैं, ऐसा नहीं होना चाहिए। ग्लाइम में भी ये दिया हुआ है अलग से, तो ये जो है वो मैंने लिखा हुआ है, वरना आपको लगेगा कि मैंने कुछ अलग सीखा, नहीं, सेम है कि देयर आर 3 टाइप्स ऑफ लीजेस फॉर लेसी। कौन से है? फर्स्ट वन इज शॉर्ट टर्म लीज, सेकेंड वन इज finance lease, and third one is operating lease. Come on everyone, there are 3 types of leases for lessee. How many? 3. पहला short term, second finance, third operating. Very good. आ जाइए, now we'll talk from the lessors. This was from the lessee point of view. Now we'll talk from the lessor point of view. So from the lessor point of view, there are again 3 types of leases. First one is sale type lease, second one is operating lease, right, and third one is direct finance lease. Now we are sale type lease is the finance lease for lessor, operating lease is operating lease for lessee, and direct finance lease is different thing, right? In ACC, if you do ACC or CPA, you will understand it. It is very easy, not difficult at all. Okay, if time permits, कैसे बनते हैं बैलेंस शीट लेसर के बुक्स में, लेसी के बुक्स में बताऊंगा, इफ टाइम परमिट्स। सिलेबस में है नहीं, एमसीक्यूज भी सारे मैंने देख चुका हूँ लीसेस पे, तो उसके ऊपर भी क्वेश्चंस है नहीं, तो टाइम पास की मतलब नहीं, चलो जाने दो, नहीं करूंगा, जितना है उतना ही करेंगे। ओके, आ जाइए फॉर लेसीज। ये देखो, ये स्टेटमेंट देखो, नॉर्मली ये स्टेटमेंट लिखा रहता है ना, ये भी ग्लाइम में होना चाहिए स्टेटमेंट। इसमें नहीं है, हॉक वाले में रहेगा शायद। इसके लिए में भी लोगों को लगता है, क्योंकि बहुत ये कंफ्यूजन रहता है कि लेसी के बुक्स में 3 लेसी के कितने रहते, 2 रहते कि 3 रहते, आपको दिख रहा है ना स्क्रीन वगैरह, तो 3 रहते हैं। इस सेंटेंस की वजह से बहुत कंफ्यूज होते हैं। फॉर लेसीज द मेन, इसलिए यहाँ पर देखो लिखा हुआ है द मेन 2 टाइप्स ऑफ लीजेस सच एज फाइनेंस लीज एंड ऑपरेटिंग लीज फॉर फाइनेंशियल अकाउंटिंग पर्पस रिक्वायर द लेसी टू रिकॉग्नाइज अ राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट एंड द लीज लायबिलिटी। ये ऊपर भी हम लोग ने देख लिया कि लेसी शुड रिकॉग्नाइज व्हाट राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट्स एंड दूसरा लीज लायबिलिटी। ये मेन 2 टाइप्स है, कंफ्यूज नहीं होना कि ये 2, ये फाइनेंस एंड ऑपरेटिंग, शॉर्ट टर्म भी। ओके, आइए नेक्स्ट पेज 1 खत्म। अब यहाँ पर लीज क्लासिफिकेशन टेस्ट है, वो करनी है हमें। तो यहाँ पर जैसे ग्लाइम के बुक में भी ना यहाँ पर टेस्ट दी हुई, स्टार्ट ही उन्होंने उससे किए थे कि लीज क्लासिफिकेशन टेस्ट है ये, और उन्होंने ना कंडीशंस दिए हुए, तो मैंने कोड भी बनाया आप लोगों के लिए, याद रखना आपको बहुत जरूरी है। अब जब ACCA करोगे तब भी और CMA के केस में भी, इसलिए मैंने कोड बना दिया हूँ इसका। अगर इसमें से कोई भी एक कंडीशन फुलफिल होती है, इफ एनी वन कंडीशन इज फुलफिल्ड, इट इज फाइनेंस लीज, एंड इफ anyone none of the condition is fulfilled, then it is operating lease. We will consider that lease to be operating then. Now let us read here, let us understand in detail. A lease is classified as finance lease. एक lease को हम लोग finance lease बोलेंगे by the lessee. We are always talking from the lessee point of view, we are not thinking from the lessor point of view. Again I'm repeating it, आपका concept clear करना है मेरे को. So a lease is classified as a finance lease by the lessee at the lease commencement, at the time of agreement. Lease commencement मतलब at the time of agreement of the lease. If at least, not all, please remember it, at least एक भी condition fulfilled by ये finance lease है, एक भी. इसके ऊपर MCQ बहुत आते हैं. It's very very important from the exam point of view, important. इसके ऊपर MCQs आते हैं एग्जाम में, MCQs आते हैं एग्जाम में. So a lease is classified as finance lease by the lessee at the lease commence if at least one of the following 5 criteria is met. At least one of the following 5 criteria are met. At least one of the following 5 criteria is met. Okay, done, sir. What are those 5 criteria? First one, owner. The code is owner. Because we know lease is like a finance lease. I'll tell you one nature of finance lease. For example, this one is lessor, this one is lessee. At the end of the lease term, at the end of the term, lessee becomes the owner. Lessee becomes the owner in finance lease. ठीक है, फाइनेंस लीज में होता क्या है, एट द एंड ऑफ द टर्म लेसी बिकम्स द ओनर. फॉर एग्जांपल, मैं वो एसेट 10 साल के लिए यूज करता हूँ, 10 साल के बाद उसकी ओनरशिप मेरे नाम हो जाएगी. यस, एट द एंड ऑफ द 10 years आई हैव टू पे सम अमाउंट टू द लेसर. ऐसे फुकट में नहीं देखा, वो सिर्फ रेंट भर के एक अमाउंट डिसाइड हो जाती है एट द लीज एग्रीमेंट ओनली, और वो हमेशा 50% होती है या 60%, नॉट मोर देन दैट. तो वो लेसी पे करता है और वो ओनर बन जाता है. सच टाइप ऑफ lease is called as finance lease. इसलिए मैंने एक कोड ही बना दिया, ओनर. Lease is classified as finance lease by the lessee at the lease commencement if at least one of the following criteria is met. तो हमें पता है कि फाइनेंस लीज में लेसी ओनर बनता है, इसलिए मैंने कोड भी बना दिया ओनर. एक इजी हो जाएगा आप लोगों को सोचने के लिए. और देयर आर 5. ठीक है, देयर आर 5. दिस इज 1 2 3 4 and this one is 5. Owner. O for ownership. First one, the point which I told you just now. Right? So ownership. The lease transfers. Lease agreement transfers what? Ownership of the leased asset. Ownership किसकी भाई? Leased asset की. किसको? To the lessee by the end of the lease term. बस समझ में आई? पहला पॉइंट. अगर लीज टर्म के एंड में ओनरशिप ट्रांसफर होती है लेसी को, तो वो फाइनेंस लीज है. सेकेंड, W, इट इज कॉल्ड एज रिटर्न बार्गेन परचेस ऑप्शन. ठीक है, कॉमनली रेफर टू एज बार्गेन परचेस ऑप्शन. वो W से कुछ नहीं मिल रहा था, इसलिए मैंने रिटर्न डाल दिया था आपको समझने के लिए. और जो भी परचेस ऑप्शन होते हैं वो लिखित में ही होता है ना नॉर्मली रिटर्न में, इसलिए मैंने रिटर्न लिखा हुआ है. वो पता लगे आपको लीज अगर ओरल में भी करना कर सकते, लेकिन डिस्प्यूट हो सकता है फ्यूचर. दिस इज ऑलवेज रिकमेंडेड दैट यू डू द लीज एग्रीमेंट इन रिटर्न फॉर्म. ठीक है, एग्रीमेंट डॉक्यूमेंटेशन नोटरी बिटरी जाके रजिस्टर करा के एक्सेट्रा. सो W, रिटर्न बार्गेनिंग ऑप्शन, परचेस ऑप्शन. सी, द लीज इंक्लूड्स एन ऑप्शन टू परचेस, कॉमनली रेफर्ड टू एज बार्गेन परचेस ऑप्शन. सर बार्गेन क्यों? क्योंकि यहाँ पर लेसी बार्गेन करता है लेसर के साथ कि एट द एंड ऑफ द टर्म ऑफ द लेसी I want the ownership of the asset, but at a very cheap rate. I'll not pay you whatever the market value of that asset is prevailing in the market. No, I'll be paying you less. So here the lessee bargains, and therefore it is a finance term called as bargain purchase option. The question में भी दिया रहता है बहुत बार. So the lease includes what? An option to purchase. the lease asset that the lessee is reasonably certain to exercise. See, if in the question it is given that lessee is reasonably certain to exercise the purchase option, that at the end of the term of the lease, that asset is, that lessee is going to purchase that asset, then also it is called as finance. Sir, what if in the question there is no information given about ownership, but only information about purchase option is given, that lessee is going to exercise the purchase option, that is the lessee is going to purchase the asset at the end of the lease term, then also it is finance lease. And if any one condition is satisfied, if any one condition is satisfied, it is finance lease, or else we will categorize into operating lease. Now, so why we are classifying the leases into finance lease, operating lease, and short-term lease? Because the accounting is different in case of all these. Here only one entry is passed. That's it. Accounting is done. As far as finance lease is concerned, the accounting treatment is different. As far as operating lease is concerned, the accounting treatment is different. And therefore, we need to classify, we need to categorize the lease into different types of leases, such as short-term lease, finance lease, and operating lease. Okay. Got it, Sirji? Yeah. Now let us come to point number 3, the criteria number 3, the test number 3, that is N, owner, N for no alternative use. If this also criteria is fulfilled, then it is termed as finance, or else it is operating use. So what is the no alternative use? See, the leased asset, whatever the asset is, it is so specialized that it is expected to have no alternative use to whom? To the lessor at the end of the lease term. See, one question may have popped up in your mind when I was doing this point number 2, criteria number 2, about the purchase option. You might have thought, why will the lessor sell the concerned asset to the lessee? This is the reason. Normally in the lease agreement, this is the lessor, this is the lessee. Now lessor, many times whenever you go into the lease agreement, lessor designs the assets, yeah, customizes the assets, customizes the asset as per the requirement of the lessee. As per the requirement of the lessor, customizes the what? Asset, leased asset, as per the requirement of the lessee. Now that asset is customized as per the lessee. So here there is one condition. If at the end of the term, if that asset cannot be used by the lessor, there is no alternative use by the lessor, lessor cannot use that asset in anyhow, then only it can be said that the lease agreement is a finance lease. For example, there is one machinery which a lessor has customized or designed for the lessee. Now this machine, for example, produces one sort of chemical which can be used only by the lessee. Now at the end of, for example, the lease term is 10 years. Now at the end of 10 years, this machine is amortized. There will be depreciation of this machinery, right? In the chapter called is that amortization, because the asset is called as lease asset. So at the end of 10 years, whatever the value of that machinery is there, that the carrying value, it will be relevant for the lessee only, because that lessee is there into that business. What will lessor do by taking that machinery? For example, if I am supplying one machinery to lessee that is of chemical, or I'm customizing, I'm designing special design for that lessee, what will I do with that machine? Am I going to manufacture any chemical, or no? I'll not do that. So that machinery is of no use to me. Okay, now it makes sense to you all. So the lease asset is so specialized that it is expected to have no alternative use to the lessor at the end of the lease term. Or else the question can come into your mind that why that asset will not be usable for the lessor. Lessor can use that asset. I'm not talking about property. I'm not talking about the building. I'm not talking about the shop. In case of those assets, there is alternative use for the lessor as well. In that case, that criteria is not fulfilled here. This Criteria can be in terms of machine, plant, or any other asset wherein such condition is there. Okay, wherein there is no alternate use for the lessor. Okay, sir, got it. Now let us move towards the criteria number 4. The criteria number 4 is that E for equal or excess PV. PV मतलब present value. PV मतलब present value. We learn to calculate the present value. We learn to calculate the present value. The formula of PV, if I were to convert anything, is 1 upon 1 plus R raised to N. We will learn it in detail. Okay, later we are going to learn it in this chapter also, in other chapters also. Okay, for example, after 1 year, सिया बीइंग मैनेजर बीइंग सीएमए, आपको ये ऑफिस में काम होने वाला, यूज होने वाला, इसके ही तो पैसे भी मिलते हैं सर. दिस इज आल्सो यूज्ड इन कैपिटल बजटिंग, इन्वेस्टमेंट डिसीजंस. इन्वेस्टमेंट कोई करने के लिए, आपके रिलेटिव में कोई कर रहा है तो आप ऐसे कर सकते हैं. ये कॉन्सेप्ट पीवी का जो एक कॉन्सेप्ट है प्रेजेंट वैल्यू, एक कॉन्सेप्ट होता है फ्यूचर वैल्यू. यू शुड नो दिस, इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट. ओके, तो होता क्या है उसमें कि 1 साल बाद अगर मुझे 1000 रुपया मिलने वाला है तो भाई, और एट द रेट ऑफ 10%, तो आज उसकी कीमत कितनी हो गई? तो आज उसकी कीमत कितनी हो गई? तो विल डू 1 डिवाइडेड बाय 1.1 मल्टीप्लाइड बाय 1000. तो आज उसकी कीमत 909 हो गई. ये कैसे निकाले आपको आना चाहिए. इसको कहते हैं डिस्काउंटिंग. डिस्काउंट करना, फ्यूचर वैल्यू को डिस्काउंट करना, इसको कहते हैं फ्यूचर वैल्यू को डिस्काउंट करना. बात समझ में आ रही है? यस और नो? एक काम कर देते हैं ना हम लोग, 1 मिनट भी नहीं है लेक्चर को, मैं सेशन यहाँ पर एंड कर देता हूँ और एक नेक्स्ट सेशन स्टार्ट कर देते हैं. ठीक है, फिर से ज्वाइन कर लेना है आप लोगों ने, फिर से ज्वाइन कर लेना है. आइए.